Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. For those of you who this is your first time, welcome. I hope you enjoy it. For those of you joining us for the umpteenth time, which is great. I can see some few very familiar names there, so that's brilliant to see. Thanks for coming back. For those of you who it is your first Digital Drams tasting, what we like to do is we want to hear your questions and comments throughout the evening. So please do keep them coming, and I'll pass them on as we go through. We also want to hear your tasting notes. So do give us your opinion on each whiskey as we go. We love that type of feedback and kind of interaction. So don't be nervous about getting stuck into that chat. And at the end, I'll be giving out the discount code that will give you 15% off all the whiskies we've tasted here tonight. But that's enough for me anyway. It's not me you came here to listen to. So I'll pass you over to Luke and Julieann Fernandez. Some of you might remember Julieann from a tasting we did with Tobermory and Legic last year. And that was a really fantastic evening. So thanks for coming back. Do you want to introduce yourselves, folks, before we get into, and then maybe get into the order we're going to go in tonight?
I'll introduce myself first because you'll be hearing less from me, but I am here to assist and help as well. My name is Luke. I'm the National Account Manager in Scotland for which is now CVH Spirits, which used to be Distell International, so we've changed there. But it just means we're now an independent company looking after Bunnahabhain, Deanston and Tobermory distilleries. And joining me this evening is Julieann, our Master Blender.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Julieann Fernandez, Master Blender for what is now CVH Spirits. So I look after all of our core range and limited editions that come from our 3 distilleries, Deanston, Bunnahabhain and Tobermory, and I look after our blends, Black Bottle and Scottish Leader. So yes, I know that you're probably all keen to start trying these liquids. So just to let you know the order that we're going to go in, we're going to start with our brand new release, which is our Deanston Tequila Cask finish. We'll then move on to Deanston's Dragon Milk Stout, followed by the 2002 Organic PX, 2008 Oloroso Matured, and then the 2008 PX Finish, just in case you want to line them up and get them in order. But yeah, if anybody gets confused and forgets the order, just let me know. I will no doubt mix them up as well, so don't worry about it. But yes, let's get started. For a lot of you, this may be your first drink of the evening. For some of you, if you come from the part of the world I'm from, which is just outside Glasgow, then most of us have probably been drinking all day. But what I would say to you is, although a lot of these are quite strong, the ABV is quite high, please try them neat first. So starting with Deanston Tequila Cask finish. So this is a 15-year-old unchill filtered, natural colour, the exact same as our core range. And this one is at 52.5% ABV. So while you're having a bit of a nose and a taste, I'll just quickly talk you through the inspiration of this and then behind this, and then we can go on to tasting notes and whatever you're getting from it. So without going too much into the history of Deanston just now, because I will continue to touch on it as we go through, Deanston Distillery it's a unique distillery. So it was originally a cotton mill, really busy, bustling cotton mill that employed over 1,500 people. At one point, it sits in the village of Deanston, just outside Doon, and it was its own little village and proper community, so they had their own currency. If you ever look at the top of a Deanston bottle, on the top of the cork, the Deanston coin is imprinted on that, so that's what they used to pay their staff at the cotton mill. But sadly, in 1965, the cotton mill had to close, and that's when Brodie Hepburn, our founder, transformed Deanston from a cotton mill into a distillery. With the location of Deanston, it is classified as a Highland distillery. So this is why I've decided to pair it with these tequila casks. So these are hand-selected casks that once held agave tequila that came from the highlands of Mexico. So those of you who don't know all that much about tequila, I didn't either. I just thought back to the days of being a student and being in the student union and shotting it with bits of lime and lick and salt. So that, I'll be honest, put me off a little bit. But once you get to research tequila and understand about the flavor profiles and all the different types of tequila from the different regions of Mexico, it's actually very, very interesting. So as I said, this tequila came from the highlands of Mexico, and it just means it's a lot more floral, a bit more sweet and fruity than some of the other tequilas that a lot of us will have been used to. So this tequila was aged in these casks for 7 years before they were emptied and sent to us, which we then filled with Deanston. And that Deanston finished for just over 2 years in these tequila casks. Because this was the first time we'd used tequila casks, it was very much an experiment. So this is an experimental limited edition. We filled the tequila casks and we just monitored it, checking it every 3 to 4 months to see how much the Deanston character was taking on the flavors from the tequila cask. And for me, the result was absolutely perfect. The fruity floral notes from the tequila cask really do complement that versatile waxy character that you have from Deanston. So yeah, obviously quite a pale gold colour. The liquid started its journey just in traditional refill whiskey casks. So nothing special there. But with Deanston being such a wonderful spirit, it doesn't need fancy casks to start with. So refill barrels and then transferred into the tequila casks. And it's given it this beautiful pale gold colour. On the nose, for me, I do get a lot of the tropical fruits coming through. So ripe pineapples, a little bit of coconut. For me, it's very reminiscent of creme brulee. And there is still a light oaky note just at the back, which is really nice. As I said, please try this neat. Let the whiskey talk to you. You'll know yourself if your palate finds it a little bit too strong and you feel it needs a couple of drops of water just to open it up. There's absolutely no right or wrong way to drink whiskey. So if you do want to add water, ice, a mixer, please feel free to. I won't judge you at all. I may talk behind your back, but no, jokes aside, there's absolutely no right or wrong way to drink it. So please drink it however you like. So yeah, on the palate, it's rich, but it's dry. It's quite a unique flavour profile on the palate. It's got caramelised agave in there. There's toasted almonds, baked apples, hints of spice in there as well. So almost like poached pears with a sprinkling of cinnamon that starts to come through. And that finish just lingers on. So it's sort of brown sugars, demerara sugar that I get, sweet and still citrusy notes in there. So yeah, for me, this is it's a unique dram. I personally prefer it at the 52.5, and I'm just sorry, I just saw, is this cask strength? No, it isn't. It's high nominated. So just to give you a little bit of context, what we tend to do is we'll take our samples at cask strength. We'll taste them and then we'll just gradually add water until we find what we think is the sweet spot. So the spot where the flavours really shine. And for this release, it happens to be 52.5%.
No, it's it's a fantastic dram. I can definitely get what you mean by the kind of creme brulee. You definitely get that kind of, yeah, those flavors, which like the kind of burnt sugars, caramel, but then also kind of, yeah, there's some kind of baked apples. It's quite nutty. It's really complex. I think the Tequila Cask really does work well with the with as you say, that typical Deanston waxy character, which Paul has said in the chat as well, and Steph has said Deanston elements, or sorry, tequila elements there for sure. You answered Christian's question. I think you pretty much answered Christian and Sharon's question about the casks after it was asked, but it was, just to clarify, it was refill bourbon and then into the tequila casks.
Yep, that's correct. Yes.
Marvelous. James has said this is a lot better than I was expecting. Wow. That's, don't know about that, James, if your expectations were low. But he says, really not a tequila fan, bad student night out, was a bit worried about what this was going to be like, but actually it's really quite spicy and fruity. I sensed the dryness. I remember having tequila in the background. I love a classy, waxy Deanston notes. So yeah, Alistair says getting the spice and the brown sugar, and David says pineapple with pear drops. So some good tasting notes so far. Keep them coming in, folks. We do want to hear your what you think of it, obviously, and any other questions you might have about the whiskey. This is £95. I wanted to beat you to that, Luke, on the whiskey shop. So you'll get 15% off that at the end. I have a question for you on the cask, and before I get there, full disclosure, I'm in Gargunnock, which is the next village over from Deanston. It's about 3 miles down the road from me. And last week, in the 4th and Endrick League in the welfare football, we beat Deanston 4-0. So I just wanted to get that on record on this recording for posterity.
That little jibe in there. There you go.
So when it comes to, you mentioned these are tequila casks from the Highlands. When it comes to sourcing those casks, what kind of process does that entail?
So we've got a range of cask suppliers that we use, and the company that we source these from are absolutely fantastic. So they have really good contacts in Mexico. They've got cooperages over in Mexico. So when I sourced these, it was 2.5 years ago. So it was right in the middle of the kind of pandemic. So sadly, we weren't able to go over to Mexico and actually see the cooperage and see the casks. But we work so closely with our cask suppliers, and they know exactly what we're looking for. So yeah, I kind of give them a brief of what I want to do. With Deanston, it has such a robust and adaptable character that you really can try lots of different cask types, and with it being the newest of our distilleries and relatively young when it comes to whiskey, as I said, it only dates back to 1966. It's the one that we can really be experimental with. And yeah, when I found out the story about these tequila casks and the fact that they were from the Highland region, I just thought it was a sort of match made in heaven, to pair these two Highland region spirits together.
I think it's a wonderful thing to note. We talk about Highland. Deanston is the most southern Highland distillery, isn't it, Julieann? So we just kind of sit just in the Highlands there, and it's a nice wee anecdote to have. But just on your casks there, I don't know if you've all noticed this evening, there's such a range of casks in your box, and I know Julieann and the team there have been doing such an amazing job of picking every cask they possibly can and putting Deanston in there to see if it works. And I don't think we've found a bad one yet, have we, Julieann? It seems to always come through, and that waxy spirit just holds up really well.
Absolutely. Look, like you say, that waxy character almost gives Deanston a robustness, which makes it hold its own. So even if you put Deanston into like a really strong sherry cask, for example, or a port cask to fully mature, a lot of other whiskies would get lost in that. And even if you look at our own brands like Tobermory, for example, it can easily get lost against big flavours. But that waxy character of Deanston just stands up, and yeah, it holds its own, and it just lends itself so well to so many different cask types.
Oh, fantastic. And I think people are agreeing in the chat inadvertently through their great tasting notes coming in there. Ian says baked apples with cinnamon on the palate. George says Satsuma's, easy peeler, school lunchbox with your tangerines. Tequila notes are definitely there. That string agave juice, especially on the nose with dark brown sugar, it's really wonderful. Matthew says definitely got the agave and flowers, long finish with lingering vanilla. Ian says spicy apple strudel, which George agrees with absolutely. I was thinking tarte tatin, we know what kind of posh restaurants George has been eating in, so apple pie, but it's puddingy. Alistair says it like it better without the water. Peppery with fresh cut grass on the palate, honeyed too. And Jeff says big fan of Deanston, but Deanston, it can take anything you put in it and something special comes out, just as you were saying there, Julieann. So that's fantastic. So when obviously this was obviously a finish. You were saying about putting Luke there said about getting sourcing any cask you can and sticking Deanston in it and seeing what works, and it all seems to work. Particularly with the age on this, would you put it into younger casks? What was the decision getting? This must have been 12, 13 years old when you went to finish, or how long was the finish again?
Yeah, that's right. So it was 13 years old when I transferred it into the tequila casks, and you're right. A lot of people would think that's a bit of a risk because obviously at 13 years old, the liquid's quite valuable. There's a lot that you could do with it, and to put it into a cask that you've never used before, it is quite risky, but it's just about knowing Deanston spirit and knowing how it adapts to the different casks and the different flavours. And yeah, I suppose I'm just in the fortunate position where my boss has a lot of faith in me and lets me just go for it, and he sees results. So yeah, it was a risk, absolutely, but it's paid off, and that's what's lovely about Deanston.
Brilliant. And Steve, in addition to that, said, how big was the batch? Like when you would have first put it in, how many casks would you have committed to this?
So it was 12,000 litres we ran to with this. So I'm trying to even think how many casks that would have been at the time. So yeah, it was a fairly sizable batch to take that risk on, but you know, sometimes with whiskey, you need to take that risk, and if the risk pays off, then brilliant, and this has. And I just think because of the flavours of the tequila, I think it did need something with a little bit of maturity there just to round it off and balance it. I think had we put it in at, say, 3, 4, 5 years old, it would have been a little bit too fiery perhaps. Whereas the maturity coming from the 13-year-old spirit before it was put into the tequila cask has just given us the perfect balance.
Definitely, yeah.
Roughly about, just sounds, I think, well, I did the maths whilst Julieann was talking, it's roughly about sort of 50, 60 casks is probably what you're looking at for that batch.
I had, yeah, about 55 casks rings a bell with me, so you'll be right, Luke. I just didn't want to commit to that and absolutely make it up, which I do sometimes.
And does that correlate with how this is obviously a limited edition? What kind of volume of bottles would you have gotten out of that, and is there a plan to repeat it or anything?
So in terms of repeating it, no, we don't have any other fresh tequila casks. And when it comes to second fill tequila casks, we will obviously do something with them. They've only been used for 2 years, so they've got a lot of life in them. But as I said, because Deanston is so adaptable, it's almost like once one's out the door, you're so excited to get on to the next one. So there's no plans just now to repeat it, but obviously we do take everyone's feedback on board. We listen to people's comments, and if it proves to be extremely popular, then absolutely it's something that we will definitely do again at some point. But for now, we're just sort of focusing on what different casks we can use for Deanston to give you something more unique and different.
Fantastic. Speaking
just
of
the second part of that, there's just under in the UK, there's just under about 5,000 bottles around in the UK, so it's relatively small in terms of batches of whiskey that you're seeing out there. Definitely a limited edition for us.
Marvelous. So Paul says, how soon are you in wanting to try Tequila Cask once the SWA relaxed the rules?
Or even before they relax the rules. So the thing with the SWA is obviously completely appreciate why they're there and the fantastic job that they do, but sometimes rules are made to get broken, and you need to explore the boundaries that you can push a little bit and take risks. And yeah, it's all about just watching trends and seeing the direction that things are going in. And I had a fair idea that the SWA were going to relax their rules. So there had been conversations before the SWA relaxed their rules, which allowed me to get the casks in really quickly and get them filled.
Yeah, so I suppose would you have in any case have matured or anything before the relaxation of the rules and just kind of taken that risk, or were you actually waiting for it to be relaxed? As in, how close to the line were you?
Always following the rules. Always following the rules.
Well, I mean, like in Irish whiskey at the moment, there's been a review of the technical file around pot still whiskey, but because people knew it was coming and they were towards the end, especially, were quite confident with that it would be altered. People have been distilling for years in something that couldn't be released now as under pot still, but once it's formalized in the new technical file, will be eventually able to be released. So there's always ways to get ahead of the game,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the making of Scottish whiskey, when they were, secretly setting up deals before the Volstead Act was repealed in America, getting all that Scotch whiskey ready for the newly open market of America. So Jeff has asked a question, but I'm not sure in terms of the context, so I'm going to use it both ways. He said, "What's the next one?" And I think he might actually be referring to your thing about getting the next whiskey down the line, getting the next release out after the Tequila Cask release. But I'm going to say the next one is the Dragon Milk Stout, Jeff. And while we're pouring that and getting that one ready, do you want to drop any hints as to what might be the next exciting cask finish release coming out?
So yeah, without obviously giving away all of our secrets, I think our next release will be down a wine route, but not your typical wines that you see on the market.
So are you suggesting that we might finally get to see a Buckfast cask?
Don't even go there. Honestly, I've been going on about this for I don't know how long. And our marketing team, who are absolutely fantastic, this is the one thing that I can't agree with them on, because I think Deanston and Buckfast would honestly go hand in hand. But no, sadly, it's not going to be a Buckfast release, but it's not going to be your typical sort of like Bordeaux or Rioja. It'll be a wine that's maybe a little bit different and a bit more experimental.
Oh, very good. Steve has asked, is it white port? And Ian says maybe you need a marketing team from Coatbridge. Brilliant. So I presume even if it was white port, you wouldn't tell us anyway. So, but maybe you might tell us a bit about something that's not a wine cask finish, but this Dragon's Milk Stout. Unless, Luke, there was something you wanted to add in before we moved officially on from the Tequila Cask.
Oh, mine was just a brief to agree with Julieann that we should probably try a Buckfast Deanston at some point, and I'm sure Julieann has the power just to do it and overrule marketing and tell them it's just a fancy wine cask. You'll be fine.
You just have to release it as fortified wine cask finish. It doesn't have to be.
There you go.
Yeah, don't have to say where it came from. I mean, you don't. I presume on this, on the next one, the PX Cask Oloroso, you don't have the bodega's name on there, so you could get away with it, get around it.
Exactly. But yes, anyway, on to the Dragon's Milk. So as I said, our distillery isn't your typical distillery. It used to be a cotton mill, and it was Brodie Hepburn's sort of entrepreneurial spirit that changed it from the cotton mill to the distillery. And we're always looking for other people who have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit and the industriousness way of working. And we found that in New Holland Brewery. So they're really, really driven by creativity. They brew, mature and bottle a selection of different beers and spirits. And this is their flagship brand. So it's a bourbon barrel aged stout called Dragon's Milk. And when they freshly emptied their casks, they sent them over to us for us to obviously finish Deanston in, which has resulted in this Deanston's Dragon Milk experimental release. So again, higher strength, so it's at 50.5% ABV. We only bottled, I think it was about 1,500 cases of this globally, so it wasn't a massive release either. So this dates back originally to December 2012, and then we transferred it into the Dragon Milk casks in August 2019. So again, roughly about 2 years finishing on this one. Part of the reason that we do round about 2 years is one, it does completely depend on the cask type. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes shorter, but just with the climate in Scotland, we obviously don't get the warmest summers. So we do need a bit of time to let those flavours just marry together. And I think that was the right amount of time for these to marry together. You're still getting the beautiful crisp green apple that I get a lot in Deanston. It's perfectly balanced with sweet honey, roasted malt, and you do get a hint of the hops coming through. And I know when we tasted the previous expression, the Tequila Cask, somebody in the comments had mentioned freshly cut grass, and that is actually a note that I get a lot with Deanston. And for me particularly, it does come through in the Tequila Cask, but it really comes through in this. So I get sort of crisp green apple and freshly cut grass. It's like an apple tree in a field with a grass that's just been cut. So all of that sort of bundled together with just that stout coming through right at the back. It is still sweet on the palate. A lot of vanilla in there, caramel, really citrusy as well, which I really like about this. I'm actually getting sharp citrus, like lemon coming through there. touch of wood in there as well. And yeah, dry finish, but the finish does linger for quite a while. And I think on the finish, almost the character of Deanston fades and the stout starts to come through. So you get sort of stone fruits and stout is what I get personally on the finish. So yeah, again, another unique and different release from Deanston.
You nailed it there, Julieann. I'm in a privileged position where I've actually tasted Dragon's Milk Stout when I've been in the States. It's an American brewery, and honestly, this is some of the most interesting beer you'll come across. It's 11%, the beer, and then obviously it's going on to the cask going on to live a life with something even stronger in it. But it's a milk stout, so there's lactose in there, and the lactose doesn't ferment when you put the yeast in there, and it makes the beer so sweet. And I think you get those sweet notes coming across in this particular whiskey. But I think it just contributes like that, sort of like almost like dark chocolate a little bit as well, and a little bit of coffee on the taste as well. But that's just me, and I've tasted this whiskey quite a bit this week for a couple of other tastings, and it's gone down an absolute storm just because it's so unique. Again, Deanston doing well in any cask, you bring it across.
Well,
yeah, just to touch on what you were saying, like when I initially did the tasting notes for this, especially in the finish, I was getting a lot of espresso coming through, so a lot of coffee. But tonight, I'm actually not getting that coffee coming through at all. I'm getting more stone fruits and things. So I think sometimes it just depends the mood you're in, what kind of week you've had. So yeah, absolutely. But you're right on the coffee.
It's remarkably different to the first one, which is being reflected by some of the comments. I definitely get the sweetness. It's much sweeter, at least than the tequila one. Jeff has said massive difference. Tequila Cask closed notes compared to Dram 1, says Paul. Horlicks and malty woodiness. I definitely get the Horlicks. It's got a tannic tingliness that the first one doesn't really have. Jamie says pear drops on the nose, light malt loaf with butter and green apple peel and a hint of IPA. George says tastes quite savory to me. Hot white pepper. James is really enjoying this bittersweet, like cooked honeycomb treacle with a creamy, chewy finish that really lingers. And Bob says not as sharp as tequila. Tried it on Tuesday and bought 2 bottles. Really suits me. Sweet, malty, and creamy. Brilliant. I'm glad to hear you bought 2 bottles, Gary. What was I going to say? We've discussed this with some of our Double Club members on this call in the past when it comes to whiskey. I personally not a fan of beer cask finishes. I don't think it really works normally. But this is I'm not just saying that. I think this really does work. It's quite different. Wouldn't be my normal type of go-to dram, but it really works. It's incredibly drinkable. I totally get what you're saying, Luke, about the dark chocolate notes, which Gary has just said in the chat there as well. And it's not just the taste of dark chocolate. It's almost like that dryness that you get off like a really high. Like 80% plus kind of dark chocolate, where it's both, you get all those kind of flavors, but also that kind of dryness in the back of the palate that this kind of delivers. So no, it's really interesting. James has said, is this another limited release like the tequila bottling? What kind of volumes was this done in, and how long do we expect it to be around for?
I'll maybe answer that question. So there's only about 1,500 cases of this done, and originally it was an exclusive online release that we did with some of our e-commerce customers, but it wasn't going to the right audiences. So we changed strategy on that and came to yourselves here at the Whisky Shop and a couple of other folks that really sort of appreciate these cask finishes, and we've now seen it flourish, really flourish. In the past, couple of months, and once it's gone, as far as I'm aware. Julieann, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is, like we've said all the way through this so far, is Deanston's about this experiment and sticking it in as many different tasks as you can to try and see what works well. And like I said, we've not found one that it doesn't work in. So once this one definitely is. Once it's gone, it's gone. And we've done you'll see on the bottle itself. There is a bit of dual branding there, so we've got the Dragon's Milk logo and stuff on there. I doubt we'd ever be able to do that again, just because of the nature of the whiskey world and everything that's going on in it. But yeah, it's unique as you're going to get, I think, in terms of beer cask finished whiskies.
Matthew said, remind me of the year the cask was 2012. Was this distilled in?
Yep, December 2012 and then August 2019. So just under 7 years old when we transferred it into these casks.
And Tony says ditto, not usually beer cask fan, but this gets a thumbs up, like the coffee grounds hit. Brilliant. This actually, I think this would be about £45. It's not live on the website at the moment. We're discussing this with Luke before we went live, and we'll get that sorted though. And when we send out the email with the recording and the reminder of the discount code at the end, we'll make sure that it's live then or linked in there in some way. So apologies that it's not on there right now, but the rest of them are. And yeah. Georgia said, what's the balancing act like between getting your dream long planned casks and using what's available and just making it work? You can only presume the limitations sometimes drive creativity in making whiskey the same way it does with making most other things. Julieann, I don't know if...
Yeah, absolutely. So I think typically when you look at limited editions, and if you look at the last two that we've just tasted, all the blend was finished in tequila casks or the beer stout casks. And whilst that is great, if you can get your hands on big batches of casks, it's fantastic. But as George said, sometimes it's very difficult to get the exact casks that you're looking for and the number that you're looking for. So that then pushes me to use a blend of different flavors. So it might be that you bring together port and rum, for example, flavors that you typically would think clash, but until you try these flavors together, it's actually phenomenal that sometimes these flavors together are absolutely amazing. So like you say, the limitations do drive creativity, and it's really interesting to be able to go through the inventory, see what we've got and see what we can pull together to make something that's really, really special.
Oh, brilliant. It's a great answer. Sorry, I'm still enjoying this whiskey. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to pop in with some thoughts or questions before we progress to the next dram. Is there anything you wanted to add, Luke?
No, I mean, if you do get the chance to come and visit Deanston, I know like most whiskey warehouses look like that scene from the end of Indiana Jones where there's crates full of stuff that contain something different. It really is like that at Deanston, because all of those casks do contain something. They're all different casks from different places. And you get to see, quite often there is a note of what that cask might be on the casks as well. So you do get to see a hint of what might become and what might not. So yeah, it's well worth a visit, I would say, if you're close enough to get there.
Oh, excellent. And for a question for both of you, I don't know who wants to take it first, but if you were drinking a beer to pair with one of the Deanston core ranges, like let's say the 12-year-old, what would it be? What's your go-to beer in a pub if you're having a half and half with Deanston?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm a beer fiend. So my first point would be drink local. I'm sure lots of you have lots of breweries around you. But I'm a huge fan of like a traditional sort of Scotch ale, like an 80 shilling or something like that, or a 70 shilling. Mainly because you do get those really malty notes through, which complements the kind of honeyed and appled flavors you're getting with the Deanston whiskies. Julieann said it a couple of times tonight already that when you're tasting a Deanston, you always usually get the crisp apple on the nose, and I think that really contrasts to the maltiness that you're going to get with a good Scotch ale, and I'm sure there's English equivalents there to go in as well. But yeah, it's that would be my preference. If you have, as we call it in Scotland, a half and a half. The first half being a half pint of beer and the other being a dram of whiskey.
And that's a great answer. And Julieann, do you have a go-to if you're having a half and a half?
Yeah, I'm nowhere near as posh as Luke. So Luke's obviously out Edinburgh way and I'm Glasgow way. So there's a massive difference in the pubs that we frequent. So for me, yeah, I need to keep it real and stick to my roots. And for me, it would be something like a half pint of Tennent's, because that's just how we do it in Glasgow. So as I said, no right or wrong way to drink anything as long as you enjoy it. But for me, I'm personally not into fancy beers and IPAs. I stick to like Tennent's and Heineken and things like that. So yeah, nothing fancy here, I'm afraid.
Fair enough.
I'll not tell marketing you said that.
No, well, look, we value the honesty. That's fantastic. I mean, put away plenty of Tennent's and Heineken in my day. Don't worry about that. James had said, Jamie had said had a great visit to warehouse number 4 last autumn. Steve said agreed, it's a great distillery. Paul said visited Deanston last year, warehouse tasting, superb triple dram tasting, recommended. James has asked, do W Club members get a discount on a Deanston whiskey tour? Now, for context, we've partner offers. Don't know why I use air quotes; they literally are partner offers. With some brands for discounted experiences if you're a W Club member. Now, I had been in contact, Luke, with I think I'm pretty sure it was Jonathan, your predecessor, but it might have been yourself. I'm sorry if it was you and I'm misremembering, but it was something we discussed and it never came to anything. Do you think there's a chance W Club members might get discounts visiting Deanston or one of your other distilleries coming down the line?
I'm sure we can absolutely work something out, Luke. I will go and pester the powers that be for that to happen. It would make a lot of sense. You know, you guys have shown so much love for Deanston. The fact that you've come to a second tasting within 6 months of doing the previous Deanston tasting, and the fact that you sold out this evening tells me a lot about what people think about Deanston and the spirits that we have to offer. So yeah, hopefully so.
Marvelous. That's great. That's how you get agreements. You publicly shame people. So fantastic. We've got this on recording. Marvelous. Fantastic. So I suppose on that note, we may as well come on to the 2002 organic PX finish. A great year, 2002. The year Ireland should have won the World Cup. But let's not go there. That was a shame. So yeah, do you want to introduce this one, Julieann?
Yeah, absolutely. So Deanston 2002 organic PX. So 17 years, 17 years old this whiskey is. The first 14 years were spent in rechar casks and then transferred into the organic PX casks for finishing. So just for a little bit of context, for those of you who don't know much about Deanston and the fact that we do an organic whiskey, we only do one run of organic whiskey every year. So we do it after our shutdown period. So in the summer, we close down, we strip down the distillery for any maintenance work, everything gets cleaned. And then when we start back up, we start on a run of an organic spirit because we have to follow sort of certain procedures and protocols for this to be classified as organic. So at Deanston, all of the malted barley that we use typically comes from Scotland, and organic's the only one that's different just because it is so difficult to get malted barley that's organic. It is Scottish barley, but it has to leave Scotland to get the barley, leave Scotland to go to an organic maltings in England, and then it comes all the way back up. So yeah, it has a bit of a journey, but on that journey, it has essentially a little malt passport that follows it around, and that's what auditors and stuff would use to check and ensure that what we're doing is organic. So yeah, other than the fact that the malt's organic, everything else we do is pretty much the same. Follow the same process, same sort of fermentation times, run the stills the same way, same water source. And then when it goes into the casks, it either needs to go into a virgin oak cask that hasn't held anything else, or a cask that's been decharred and recharred so that you've taken away any remnant of what that cask's previously held. For years, we really struggled to get organic casks that were sort of organic sherry or organic wine casks. And that's why when we originally launched Deanston Organic, it started off as a 14-year-old, which was essentially just in refill casks. And then we changed it to a 15-year-old. But now that we're starting to see like PX, Fino, organic Olorosos coming through, it means that we can be a little bit more creative when it comes to our organic releases. And this is obviously one of them here. So yeah, as I said, 17 years old, first 14 years in the rechar casks before being transferred into the organic PX casks. This was a limited bottling as well, so it was just over 3,100, I think it was, of this. And this has actually won quite a few awards. And I think what's really special about that is so much work goes into creating Deanston Organic. Like I say, it costs us an awful lot of money to strip down the distillery and make sure everything's clean, and the malt's more expensive, the casks are more expensive. So it's nice to get that recognition, and I do think it deserves it because it's a beautiful whiskey. It's very dry on the nose. There's actually a very slight hint of sulfur that comes through that's coming from those PX casks, but it's beautifully balanced by sweet dried fruits, raisins, dates. They all complement each other. On the palate, it's still beautifully sweet, so a lot of caramel in there. Still get the beautiful mouth coating that you're used to with Deanston. This is obviously non-chill filtered as well. It's cask strength at 49.3. And yeah, a lot of sort of candied orange peel, sherry soaked raisins. So you are getting the perfect balance of the organic spirit and the PX sherry casks.
I think it's just worth noting as well, with, you know, Julieann's mentioned the cost of doing things organic. With organic malted barley, we tend to get a bit of a less yield out of it as well. Is that right, Julieann? And that less, put it this way, our accounts department doesn't like us doing organic whiskey because you don't get as much bang for your buck in terms of the malt. And you will see a little bit of a, you know, Deanston is probably one of the most affordable whiskies out there for age statements and limited editions. But you will see a slight increase when it has the word organic in front of it. And trust me, it's for good reasons. And it's not because it's exclusive. It's because it's genuinely a little bit more expensive to make, and we're putting a little bit of extra effort into it when we do produce these whiskies. Just on the tasting note side of things, for me, you mentioned the sulfur there. I like using the word funky. You do get a little bit of funk from Deanston organic things. I'm not quite sure why. I'm sure there's lots of science behind it, but I don't know how much we've delved into that, Julieann, right enough.
Yeah, so I can completely understand what you're saying, and I think sulfur is one of those things that I'm actually very sensitive to sulfur, and a lot of the times it can come across as essentially an off note in whiskey. But when you're using sherry casks, there can be a very slight hint of sulfur just at the back, and it's just very, very important that it's almost a back note rather than a front note. So we would obviously never want that note to lead, but it is a good way of bringing all the flavors together. So sometimes those kind of sulfury notes can help bind all the flavors together. And yeah, it's quite funky, as you say, Luke. But it's not overpowering in any way. And that, I guess, is part of the art and science of blending, is that too many sulfured casks in a batch and you've absolutely ruined it, but having a little bit in there is fine. So it's just about getting that balance absolutely right.
It's having that sulfur element reminds me of more old school whiskies, when you, particularly from the 60s, 50s, you used to get a lot more of that sulfur element as kind of standard in core releases back then. What that makes me sound really pretentious, but you know, from what I've tried, so it's, you know, I really don't mind it at all. I know some people it's not their tasting, but we've got some really good feedback here. With Tony said McVitie's ginger nuts on the nose, nice. I've never wanted ginger nuts on the nose, but that's good. Georgia says floral honey, soil and pine, mossy wax apples, sharp bananas, pineapple, papaya. Alistair said very smooth. Matthew says light white peach on the nose. And white peach is a tremendous taste note for me for this, because I must say I do agree with the McVitie's as well. I can see where all the ones coming from, but that white peach really was like struck a chord with me. I was like, oh yeah. Oddly, mountain stream freshness on the nose, light red wine and red currants, caramel and wax. Sea air on the nose is my first reaction, says Gary. Tony says nice heat to it, more stem ginger than peppery. George says I may be losing my marbles, but this one is like a liquid caramelized mild cheddar. Interesting. Paula says plum crumble with baker's yeast on the nose, dark chocolate and biscuits, vanilla with brown sugar. James says, was this PX one of the three, was the PX from these casks organic too originally? Love a PX, waxy molasses and salted caramels. Of course, classic Deanston mouthfeel. In the background you're getting a haystack note too. You definitely said, Julieann, that you know, said it was difficult to source organic sherries, but did you succeed in this? This one is organic in that sense?
Yep. So for us to classify it as organic, as Luke said, it has to be organic from grain to glass. So if we put the organic whiskey into, say, a standard bourbon barrel, for example, it's no longer classified as organic. So as Luke said, that is what inflates the price that little bit, because these casks are extremely expensive to buy. There's not many organic sherry producers around, so the casks are really hard to get a hold of, and when you do, it's small numbers, which is why these are limited releases and they are really expensive. But yeah, absolutely are organic. So we bought it was a load of mixed organic casks. We got organic PX, organic Oloroso, and organic Fino, and we've just managed to get our hands on organic Bordeaux. So that will be the next challenge for organic, is when it's going into the Bordeaux casks, how long it goes in for, and what exactly we're going to do with it.
No, fantastic. And you say expensive. Obviously, the whiskey is £128 on our website. That's before your 15% discount from this tonight. So I think that's for a regular 17-year-old in the current market, the way whiskey's going, that's not bad, let alone something with this kind of story and these kind of flavors. For me personally, in terms of taste, I really, really like it, but it doesn't, from what your expectations of what you're going to get when a whiskey says PX on it, totally subverted for me. You don't get those classic dried fruits, the kind of the extra sweetness. It's really good, but it totally wouldn't. If I picked it up expecting a PX, kind of classic PX malt, it's very, very different. Why do you think that is? Is that to do with the way it's finished, or is there a reason why it doesn't have some of the more kind of almost cliched sherry PX notes?
Yeah, because 3 years is quite a long finish, so you would expect it to take in a lot more of the PX. But I suppose as well, what we're comparing it to is standard PX, which is going to be slightly different from organic PX. So you need to kind of take into account all these little differences as well. And yeah, just the character of Deanston Organic New Make Spirit is slightly different to Deanston as a Deanston Original New Make Spirit. So it's just everything combined. But yeah, I totally see what you say. Even the colour, it's not as dark as what you would expect from a PX cask. And for me, that is actually what I quite like about it, because it spent 3 years in these PX casks and it's not been overpowered at all. You're still getting some of the PX flavours, but it's not going to hit you in the face. So we've still got the wonderful organic flavour at the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I suppose, as you say, not all PXs are created equal, in the sense that some can be quite, closer to the dry side as opposed to the really treacly sweet ones. So that makes 100% sense now. No, thanks for clarifying that. Paul, it's an interesting one about the when you take the hearts and the heads from the still when you're distilling organic whiskey. Do you change that process in any way in the distillation? Is there any risk of cross contamination from recycled heads and tails from the previous batches, or how does that operate?
No, so because we obviously close down the distillery and clean everything out, there's no residue from Deanston Original when we go on to the organic, because we can't kind of risk that contamination. But no, we pretty much keep everything the same. Fermentation times, our cut points, everything is done basically the exact same way as we distill Deanston Original.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, perfect. As well as the ABV and everything, which as Paul touched on. So no, that's brilliant. James said it's a lot lighter than I expect in color, especially when you said it's finished for about 3 years. That kind of just reinforces what we were just discussing. Georgia said, how long does it usually take once you've decided that a blend is ready to decide upon bottling and an ABV? And what's the process like? Is it one long day? Do you get multiple opinions? Presumably you can't drink too much of the product for business reasons. So I suppose that the process of picking casks to marry and blend and the final product is what George is asking. Apologies if that's too crude a summation, George. But yeah, so Julieann, how does that process work? And particularly what he said about ABV, how do you decide where the sweet spot is? What's a day in the life of Julieann like?
Yeah, so it can be a very long process. So like I say, with Deanston, we're using so many experimental casks that what we'll do is we'll try and sample them every maybe 3 or 4 months. We keep them at Deanston usually, or at our site in East Kilbride, just so that we can monitor them really closely. And we compare, when we take the samples, we'll compare them to the previous sample and see how much more flavour it's taken on. What is obviously really important is that we don't mask the wonderful character of Deanston. So once we decide that it's at a point where it's ready and we don't want any more of that cask influence, This is when I make it more difficult for our marketing team and stuff, because obviously we are working to a 5-year plan, but with whiskey, you just never know how long something's going to take. So I could say that one year is going to be a PX release, for example, and the following year's the Oloroso. But when I'm actually assessing the casks, the Oloroso's ready first. So I switch it round, which can be a bit of a nightmare for our marketing team, but they do totally understand that everything is based on the liquid, and it's the quality of the liquid that matters. So once we've decided it's ready, what we do is we want to try and keep the ABV as high as possible. And the reason for that is because I'm obviously very fortunate that I get to taste this wonderful liquid straight from the cask, and I want people buying Deanston to be able to get the exact same experience as what I do. So if it's not going to be at cask strength, then we'll reduce it down. It will never be below 46.3 usually, unless it's a very old product, just because that's where we keep all of our core range. Because we don't chill filter, we have to keep it quite high, just to make sure all of those oils and stuff stay in solution. But when it comes to either cask strength or high nominated, we'll just add we'll basically line it up, add a few drops of water to each of them. And essentially I do it blind. I'll nose and taste each of them. And then I'll go away, I'll come back, I'll do it again. And there's usually one that stands out, and it's because the flavors are just amplified at a certain strength. And then it's as simple as strength checking it, and there's your magic number. So I don't do it by sort of predetermined strengths. It's completely done blind by adding water and then checking the strength. And yeah, when we do things like this on site, we obviously can't drink too much at all. We tend to spit everything out, but just with ways of working and things, everything's changed with COVID. So we are doing a lot more at home now, which does have its advantages, because it means that we can all taste at home together. I do like to get other people's input and opinions. So our marketing team, for example, our sales team, we work so closely together. And Luke will tell you himself, if he's ever about when I'm doing limited editions and doing things, I'm always inviting people in to try them and taste them and get their opinion. And yeah, so line it up, check it, and do it again at home. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the time a whiskey can taste differently depending on your mood, your frame of mind, the weather outside. So I like to try it in a lot of different settings. So it's nice to try it in a work environment, but then to come home and try it when I'm a little bit more relaxed. And yeah, there's a lot that you need to take into account just to get it absolutely perfect.
Yeah, no, that's excellent insight. And I suppose I have two questions. One on your last point there about the work environment and then trying it when you get back home. I suppose we've discussed in terms of experiences with some of these tastings of previous topical members, like it's like when you taste a wine or a whiskey at the distillery and you're on maybe on holidays and you're in that mode, you think, oh, this is amazing. Or if you're in Spain or France and you try a wine on holidays and you're like, yeah, this is great, I could sit out on the veranda and drink this all evening, and you get it home and you're like, what was I thinking? This is muck. Do you ever get that in terms of kind of tasting something in a work setting and being very serious about it and think, okay, no, this works, or the opposite, thinking this doesn't work, get it home and it's like, wow, no, this is when you're relaxing in front of the Eurovision, realize it's amazing?
Tequila was actually one of those ones where when I tasted it in the lab, I knew it was good and I was happy with it, but I wasn't sure if it needed that little bit of extra time. So then I came home and I actually set a few drams up outside for the limited editions that I was working on, and it just was the brightest, sunniest day in Scotland, probably the one day of sun that we get a year. And I don't know if it was the sunshine or I don't know, but the flavour had just changed. And I would say in the lab, I was getting more of the sort of freshly cut grass and apples. But when I came home, I was relaxed. I was sitting outside in the sunshine. All the tropical fruits were coming through. There was coconut, there was pineapple. And yeah, that's when I knew that it was absolutely ready. So I think sometimes it is important just to kind of take a step back and just reassess whenever you can.
Makes perfect sense. Might be a good time to start pouring the 2008 Oloroso if you agree, Julieann. But while we're doing that, my second part of that question was when Brendan was on, he mentioned in the Deanston distillery that they have old fashioned Fridays, where people make old fashions in the distillery and drink them as the way they end the work week. Is that something you've attended, or are you aware of this practice that goes on in Deanston?
Yeah, absolutely. So my wonderful colleagues who do this, so Luke is a huge fan of a Deanston Old Fashioned and makes a very good Deanston Old Fashioned. And it's something that I have been involved with in the past, but these people are at a fantastic stage in their life where they don't have two young children running around their legs on a Friday evening when you're trying to enjoy a drink. So where they can sit and make their old fashions and enjoy it. I don't quite have that luxury yet. So yeah, if we started doing Old Fashioned Friday at 9 o'clock at night when my kids were fast asleep and I was actually getting peace, then I absolutely would be up for it. But it just always seems to fall at a time where I'm just a little bit too busy. And I know Luke's laughing because the number of times he's done Old Fashioned Fridays and I've wanted to join in and all he hears is screaming children. So yes, but Luke is massive for Old Fashioned Fridays and is very, very good at it.
Excellent. So do you do them remotely, do you?
That's what we try and tend to do. It started off as just sort of an internal thing within sort of Deanston and the marketing team and the sales guys and the guys who make the whiskey. And it did turn into Instagram lives, which we're going to carry on doing on a Friday. So if you want to follow myself, Whisky and Rugby, and join in, you're more than welcome to do so. But we try and use a different Deanston every time we do it. We don't go too expensive. We try to stick to the core range stuff and maybe a limited edition here and there. But we're quite privileged at CVH Spirits that we're also the distributor in the UK for Angostura bitters. And every single one of you in your cupboards somewhere will have a little bottle of Angostura bitters with the yellow cap on it and the oversized label. And it was just a nice idea to try and bring those two things together, because old fashions traditionally have been bourbon or American whiskey, but actually you can make a damn good old fashioned using Scotch whiskey as well, and the waxiness and the orange and the apple and all that sort of stuff, those characteristics of Deanston really work in an old fashioned, and it's anyone can make one. It's such an easy drink to make. It's just the three ingredients. You get your whiskey, your bitters, and a little bit of sugar syrup, and of course dilute it down in some ice, or just pop some ice in the glass if you just feel like you're going to have a lazy Friday. And yeah, it's one of those things that we've just kind of tried to inspire people to do, instead of just, yes, drinking whiskey neat's great, but you can also have a cocktail, and it's probably the best way to start your Friday night. I don't know, it's an honest way of doing whiskey.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm a bit of an old-fashioned purist. I actually have an old-fashioned tattooed on my arm. What I mean by purist is that I hate. And not that I never do. I sometimes do move away from bourbon, but it takes a lot of convincing for me to do so, or bourbon or rye in the old fashioned. So I haven't tried a Deanston old fashioned, but I'll have to. Maybe we could do a W Club special collaboration some evening. Something. Well,
let's do that. I'll speak to you about it after, Luke, but I'm sure we can get some miniature bottles of bitters to send it to everyone as well for a tasting. And yeah, it's one of those things that I think everyone's just going to enjoy, and it's a nice way to either start the evening or finish the evening. It can be a digestif or an aperitif in that manner.
Excellent. No, that's a great idea. We'll pick that up offline, as they say in the corporate world, and come back on that. So we'll come on to George has got a good question, but I'm just conscious of the time. So maybe we'll come on to the Oloroso, because I know a few people have poured it, and then I'll come back to your question, George. So I'm not skipping it. I'm just reshuffling the order. Brilliant. So Julieann, do you want to tell us about this Oloroso 2008 Oloroso?
Yep, so 2008 Oloroso matured. This is at 52.7% ABV. And again, just to reiterate, I would try it neat. For me personally, I like this neat. I don't add water to this, but feel free to do whatever you like. So while you're nosing and tasting it, I'll just talk you through a little bit of the history of this one. So as we said, Deanston Distillery started off as a cotton mill. And as part of the cotton mill, there was a weaving shed where they obviously weave the cotton. And what's really interesting about that is when you're weaving cotton, you need the temperature to be very, very stable. So in this warehouse now, where we mature a lot of our Deanston, the temperature gradient from the bottom of the warehouse up to the top is only, you'll be lucky if there's sort of like 1 degree of a difference. Whereas in other warehouses, like your sort of traditional, whether it be a dunnage warehouse, the temperature gradient is much more. And that's what makes this Deanston really, really special. So these casks have been matured in this weaving shed since 2008. And it means that you get a really, really even maturation, which I think is really lovely. And as we said, sometimes when you put whiskies into Oloroso casks or sort of powerful casks, you can lose it. But that's what's really special about Deanston, is that you don't lose it. That character is still there. You absolutely would still know that this is Deanston. So yeah, 12 years old. And it took on a massive amount of colour, so a beautiful auburn colour. For me, on the nose, I'm getting lots of cherries coming through. There's chocolate. It's almost like a Black Forest Gateau. Spice in there as well. Hint of nutmeg this time, and some sultanas. And for me, it's the mouth coating on this that is absolutely beautiful. So you've got the treacle toffee, the dark fruits, you've got spice, hint of coffee in there, a little bit of pine. And I just feel like it lingers forever. It almost is like a 4D experience. It coats all of your palate, and it's just a long, warming finish. I'm getting the McVitie's gingerbread coming through now. Nutmeg in there again on the finish. And yeah, just really warming, really rich. But that waxy character of Deanston still shining through. It's not been lost at all.
No, I would say it's almost amplified. It's extra sticky wax is almost you're going with that, and I absolutely love this whiskey. It's just a shame there's not enough of it about.
It's the most classic and conventional of the ones we've tried so far tonight in terms of Scottish Highland sherry whiskies. Definitely, but maybe that's just my opinion anyway. I think, and that's not. I don't mean that as a negative to this one or the other one. It's just an observation. The tasting notes are interesting. Sarsaparilla on the nose, pencil case, just a touch of struck matches. Dunnage warehouse, damp and woody. Stunning, says Alistair, which is one of my favorite tasting notes. Jamie says that the sherry is strong with this one, which Steph replies with, "May the sherry be with you." So we're getting Star Warsy in the chat. Alistair said Christmas cake. We got sherry hit from Jess. Too much sulfur and sherry for me. Much prefer the previous one, says Carol. Stewie says, "Whoa, this one is the one I was most excited for, and it's incredible." Coca, says Tony. Matthew says, "Interesting. Shoe polish, trifle and bitter peel, overcooked stewed apricots with acidic finish, spent firecracker / gunpowder lingering. Gorgeous. Love sherry's whiskies, and this one doesn't disappoint." George says the struck matches, firecracker, gunpowder notes are on point, like the 5th of November. That's, you shouldn't bring up the 5th of November in front of an Irishman. That's rude. This is £72, which I think is incredible value for a dram like this. Any initial thoughts on those tasting notes there, either yourself, Luke, or Julieann?
I love watching tasting notes because they're all correct. They are. I just want to know when the last time someone smelled gunpowder. It's a very old-fashioned way of describing something. I love it. And pencil case, like that's a really good tasting note, because everyone used to have a pencil case at school, and it always used to have that aroma of the lead and stuff coming through. And yeah, it's really interesting reading these tasting notes. And I agree with them all. They're all very good.
Yeah, gunpowder and pencil cases are two things you don't get a lot of these days. But yeah, that's true. I never thought of it that way. Julieann, any thoughts yourself?
Yeah, tasting notes are so subjective. So as Luke said, there's no right or wrong answer, and all of these are great. Whiskies are so different. So you're not going to like every single one of them, and that's fine. And it will be that some people don't like sherried whiskies and they prefer ones that have maybe been in bourbon casks. And that's what's nice about doing tastings like this, is you can try so many different whiskies. But yeah, the tasting notes are great. And as you said, with the pencil case one, what I love about whiskey is sometimes when you're nosing it, it can almost take you to a place, and as soon as pencil cases were mentioned, as Luke said, it takes you back to your school days, which for me wasn't that long ago, but for Luke was obviously a lot longer. So yeah, it does take you somewhere, which is nice. So yeah, I like the tasting notes; they're very good.
I think it'd be interesting if you do have a second glass for the next whiskey to compare the two whiskies side by side. And the only reason I'm saying that is they're both, they were put into casks in 2008, one fully matured, obviously, in Oloroso, and the next one's going to be finished in PX. And it gives you an opportunity just to see the sort of range of things that goes on at Deanston with that waxy spirit. You're still going to get that same spirit character. But the one thing I would say about Deanston, and we talk about non-chill filtered, no color added. That goes for every distillery that we look after. So it's the same for Bunnahabhain. It's the same for Tobermory and Leitchig. We're not adding any color. We're non-chill filtering. It's all natural, and that's just to do with the theme that goes through, especially at Deanston, which I would describe as honesty. And I've talked about visiting the distillery, and we'll work on trying getting you a discount to go there. When you go to Deanston, there's no computers. It's all valves and levers, and it's one of the few distilleries in the world, never mind just Scotland, that has an open top mash tun. So you can literally see everything that's going on at the distillery, and it's quite a tight space. There's often people in high vis just shuffling their way past the tour group to go and pull a lever somewhere to make sure that the whiskey comes out at the right time, and the new make comes out at the right time, or the mash goes in the right direction. And that theme of honesty, I have to say, even if I'm being biased, I am on the sales team. I'm not in Julieann's makers team. There's nothing to hide with any of these whiskies, and I hope that's come across in the range of whiskies that you've tasted so far this evening. But you're going to get a pure example here of something that was made in the same year, but completely different in the next whiskey.
No, that's excellent. So we might, if to compare them side by side, maybe it's worth, for those you haven't, to pour out the next one. But before we actually maybe start nosing and tasting it, just want to come back to George's question about the Tequila Cask one. They've just gone back to the very first one, but he said that for that whiskey, sorry, I've lost the question now. It was in front of me, and I was already from memory. It's something like that whiskey says it's the first in a series of cask finishes. Do you know how many there's going to be in that? Sorry, George, I've lost that question, but I think I've got that one right. It was along those lines. Is there a plan, Julieann, for how many in that series is going to be?
No, so I don't think we can put a number on it just yet. We worked to a sort of 5-year plan, so there's 5 in your series. But after that, I don't know. I suppose my job is just to make the liquid, and we have wonderful teams who make the decisions behind the scenes. But I would like the experimental series for Deanston to continue, as long as we can get unique casks and do something really different. I think it's a wonderful way of showcasing how adaptable and unique Deanston's character is.
Marvelous. It was actually Joe's question. There was a question that also banked in my mind to come back to. So the one we skipped was Joe's question about the Tequila Cask, which we've just answered, and George has clarified his one there, which is why I couldn't find it, because I was looking for George's name rather than Joe's name. So apologies to Joe and George. He says, sorry if it's too many questions, but how much attention do you pay? There's no such thing as too many questions, George. Don't worry, we'll just ignore you after a while if it is too much. So don't have to clarify anything. He says, but how much attention do you pay to what other distilleries are doing with their cask choices, barley, bottling, marketing, etc., and does that influence the direction of Deanston at all?
It's always interesting to see what other distilleries are doing and cask types and things like that. As I said, at Deanston, we've got a sort of entrepreneurial spirit, so we do want to be the first to do a lot of things, which is why we were so quick to order the tequila casks, and we will always try and order unique casks that people maybe haven't tasted before. So as much as it's interesting to see what other distilleries are doing, it's not going to influence what we do. And as Luke already mentioned, Deanston's a very traditional distillery, so no computers, everything's done manually up there. It really still is the heart of the community. The team that work there, most of them, their fathers and their grandfathers worked there. They've had family members that have worked in the mill. They all stay in the local village. So for me, it's about keeping Deanston true to what it is. And we're only one of 2 distilleries that make this unique waxy character. So for that reason, there's only certain things that we would want to change, because we don't want to lose that true character of Deanston. We have the most beautiful setting. We use water from the River Teith that sits, that runs by the front door. It flows over granite, so it's beautiful, soft water. As Luke said, this open top mash tun that is really unique. It allows you to see right in there. Our fermentation times are quite long because we know that we need those fruity esters as a precursor before it goes into the still to get as that waxy character. The stills are really, really tall. They also have an inclining lie pipe, so it means that you get a lot of reflux. So as it's distilling, the higher alcohols really struggle to get up and over, so they constantly come back down and they reflux and they get distilled again and again. And that's what creates this super light, fruity, waxy character that can't really be replicated and is what makes Deanston so special and so unique. So yeah, I think Deanston will always do its own thing.
No, that's a brilliant answer. There's a couple of great comments coming in from different people, but we'll maybe come on, if people are saving a bit of the PX, we'll come on, a bit of the Oloroso, we'll maybe come on to that PX and then come back to those other couple of points as well. So do you want to tell us about this PX 2008, Julieann?
Absolutely. So 2008 PX, again, this is one of my favourites because I think the colour on it's absolutely beautiful. It's taken on so much of the flavour, and it's so interesting, as we said, to compare it to the Oloroso. So this started its life in bourbon casks, like the majority of Deanston does, just because the character of bourbon and Deanston just go hand in hand and create a beautifully sweet liquid. So it started in bourbon cask and was finished for 3 years in the PX casks. So it's a 13-year-old single malt. Again, a really limited bottling. I think it was only 2,000 and odd bottles, so not a lot at all. And yeah, 13 years old with 10 years in bourbon, 3 years in the PX, and this one has really kept its strength. So typically we do fill into cask at 63.5%, and this one, surprisingly for a 13-year-old, really hasn't dropped that much. So it is still sitting at 58.1% ABV. That's cask strength, so this isn't high nominated. That's exactly the strength that it came out the cask. And as I said before, I like to keep as many as we can at cask strength, because not only does it give you good value for money, but like I say, I feel it allows you to drink the whiskey, add some water, open it up, and just decide how you feel it's best. So yeah, lots of nuts coming through on this. There's a lot of oak, there's caramel, coffee, dark chocolate. This one really has a complex nose. There's sultanas, there's figs. For me, I actually get a hint of leather in there as well. But yeah, really rich and deep, complex nose. And that does follow through to the palate. So the first note I get on this is orange marmalade. So it's almost as Luke had mentioned on the last one, the waxy character is almost amplified. And when you get these notes that are like blackcurrant jam and orange marmalade, it gives you more of a sort of experience. It coats your palate. And I think that's a flavour mixed with a waxy character that just really amplifies that. So I get orange marmalade, I get dates, I get raisins, still a lot of vanilla in there, like fresh vanilla pods, brown sugar, and then a lovely warming clove spice. Again, This one for me could be reminiscent of Christmas, but what I would say is that it actually, as it sort of dissipates in your mouth and the flavors start to leave, I get quite light notes of sort of creamy strawberries and hints of gentle oak, which I don't think I expected from this, because it is quite full-bodied with the dates and the raisins in there. I expected that to follow through to the palate, the finish, but I do get freshly picked strawberries, sort of drizzled with cream. So yeah, really, really lovely, complex dram.
It's really interesting. This is probably the first one I probably would just consider adding water to. I haven't tried it yet, but it is quite it's quite intense. But I don't mean that in a negative way at all. But it's one of those ones. If you had someone over who doesn't drink a lot of whiskey, I probably wouldn't pull for it first. But it's got some great comments coming in there. George says pears on the nose, furniture polish on the nose, says Steve, which is one of those ones that is an ambiguous thing because some people love the smell of furniture polish, others would run a mile from it. Ian says that he needs to drop off, but favourite of the night was the organic PX, and that's interesting because I think they've all been fantastic so far, but this is so different than the organic PX. You wouldn't think this is, I suppose, goes back to what I was saying when we were tasting that this is much more closer to what you would expect from a cliched Highland PX cask finish. Paula says sat in an old leather armchair, sumptuous. Heavy clove note on the nose. Bob says best one for me tonight. Best one tonight for me. So easy to drink at cask strength. And Matthew says we're on the 2008 Oloroso. No, we're not, Matthew. Sorry, we've kept some of the Oloroso and we've moved on to the PX, but we deliberately did it quite quickly so that we could compare the difference between the two. And Paul says Christmas trifle, definitely my favorite of the night. Love the higher BV. Going back to that comparison, Julieann, is there anything that jumps out to you now that we've tried them side by side? What you think?
So just firstly, not to compare it to the Oloroso, but just when you mentioned there about the organic PX, like you say, this one spent 3 years in PX casks as well, and the colour, the aroma, everything is so much more different. And like you say, this one, it has all those thick notes, the orange marmalade, the berries, everything that you would expect from a PX. But yeah, in comparison to the Oloroso, for me, the Oloroso is more sort of dark berries, black currants, and that real Christmas spice. Whereas the PX, as much as you get the Christmassy notes and things, I do still get some lighter fruits coming through. But what I think is really lovely is when you look at them side by side, so one's been fully matured and one's had a 3-year finish, and you can still pick out that they're Deanston. So in both of them, you still have the waxy character, you still have the honey, you still have crisp apple coming through, all from the new make spirit. So it does just show you how adaptable Deanston is, that you can mature it in an Oloroso cask and not lose it, and then a 3-year finish and it's still absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I think they're both wonderful in their own right.
No, totally. Chris said we visited the distillery a couple of weeks ago and saw some barrels of Spanish wine with oranges. They look very interesting. How do you think they will suit Deanston? Barrels of Spanish wine with oranges. Do you have Spanish wine with oranges in the distillery, Julieann?
Well, I've got no idea who showed you that, but they'll be getting sacked from doing tours if they're showing people our experimental casks. But to answer your question, yes, I think it will go absolutely perfectly with Deanston. Like we say, that waxy character, for me, sometimes it comes across as almost like biting into an orange. So see that really citrusy orange peel. So I think that with orange wine will just go hand in hand and work really, really beautiful together.
Brilliant. Bob has said, please don't sack anyone. We don't want to get out I think I've mentioned this on a previous Deanston call, but my partner also works in the whiskey industry. She started her life as a part-time tour guide in Deanston a few years back. Not that long ago, but longer than she would like me to mention. So yeah, the Bob has said, is there going to be a second edition of the Chronicles bottling? Will Distillery bottling ever come back?
Yes, so Chronicles definitely, Distillery, yes, as well. I think we can commit to both of them. So yeah, watch this space. We're working on a lot just now, and yeah, what I love about those releases are how different and unique they are. So they go back to what we spoke about earlier with pulling really different cask types together. And that's what I love about them. So I'll be really keen to do new releases of them, absolutely.
Brilliant. Alistair, we must raise a glass to Alistair. He's retiring next month. Congratulations, Alistair. He says, trying to decide which bottle to open out of 4 spectacular bottles to celebrate. And Deanston 97 PX is one of the 4, and tonight might have made his mind up on which one to open. So that's great. Congratulations on retirement, Alistair. If you were in France, it probably would have been a few years ago, but I'm happy it's come along anyway. Sorry that you could be retiring at 30. I have no idea, that was a bad joke. Stephen says, I've got to go, but thanks for an amazing night. My first, but definitely not my last. And Stephen says, how? So Stephen has asked how the buying discount works. So I'm going to type in the code now, which is what you use at checkout for these whiskies to get your 15% off. While I'm doing that, Luke, you've been quiet for a while. Is there anything you'd like to add in? But also while Luke is talking, do you want to give your, as we do at the end of these nights, which people are already firing in there, give your preference as to what your favorites were of the night? We always love to see that, and I'll get typing that discount code. Step in, Luke, with some witty remark, you know,
some witty remark. I don't know how witty I actually am, Luke, but we'll crack on regardless. Just some sort of insider knowledge for you all. I mean, you'll hopefully know our other 2 distilleries, Bunnahabhain and Tobermory, quite well as well. And Bunnahabhain is quite often described as the crown jewel in CVH's spirits sort of jewelry, shall we say? But the thing about Deanston, it's likely in the next couple of years that it will surpass production of Bunnahabhain and become that bigger distillery, as folks like yourself are discovering, you know, how much Deanston has to offer. And we've talked tonight a lot about experiments and experimental casks and the waxy characteristic of Deanston. It's one of these things that Julieann, I'm sure, is trying really, really hard to break Deanston waxy spirit by finding a cask it doesn't work in, so we can find some limitations for what it is that we do with the spirit and what cask we put it into. Again, I appreciate that I will be biased about the situation, but watch this space. I think in the next 5 years, next 10 years, Deanston will become one of the bigger names in the whiskey world for producing things that are just a little bit different and have a little bit of robustness about them. And that honesty factor is key to that. Just being honest about what it is we're doing, and be honest about the spirit, non-chill filter, no added colouring. And letting it speak for itself. And Julieann kind of outlined how we do things at CVH very clearly. Is we start with the liquid, and then we worry about selling it. So the marketing and my chat and all that sort of stuff comes later. It's all about the spirit that's coming out of those casks, and Deanston is the exciting one for all of us at CVH right now. I'm sure Julieann will agree because she looks after 3 distilleries. But she's not meant to have favourites, but I suspect Deanston's probably edging closer to being a favourite.
Oh, brilliant! I've just put the code into the chat there, folks, a minute ago. So it's WS16DVT. Should give you 15% off all these whiskies. As I mentioned, the Dragon Milk isn't on there right now, but it will be hopefully by tomorrow, if not shortly after that. We've got some great responses there in terms of people's favorites. I think just judging from quickly adding them up in my head, I think the PX 2008 has won it, followed by the Oloroso and then the organic PX. So that's interesting. But there's a real mix there, which is what we love to see, where there's not one clear best dram followed by this. It's really close. So that's really great to see. There is there's some great feedback in terms of, James said the high ABV is something I always enjoy with Deanston, so please keep doing that. As a day-to-day drinker, your Virgin Oak is my absolutely favorite because it's the quintessential Deanston for me, and if I'm ever up north that far, I'll definitely drop in for a tour. Paul said the Dragon's Milk was surprisingly good, however, Dram 5 bang on the money. Christian and Sharon said this was a wonderful tasting. Thank you so much. We are complete Deanston newbies, and this was a revelation. So brilliant. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Alice says I would place any of these top at a different point of the year, but tonight the organic hit the few spots, followed by the tequila, but close across the range. So that's interesting. It goes back to what we were saying about time and place and situation, Julieann, earlier on. So that's brilliant. There's some fantastic comments. Apologies if there's a few ones that I probably have missed there in the last while, because there's a few flooded in. So apologies if I have. Julieann, is there anything you wanted to add before we maybe finish for the night?
No, I would just like to thank everybody for coming and supporting Deanston. As Luke said, sometimes it can be under the shadow of Bunnahabhain, but it's people like you who are out there drinking it, talking about it, that are really making it shine. And yeah, just keep an eye on Deanston, because I think there's some really exciting things to come from it. And it certainly has a special place in my heart, and I will continue to produce what I think are exceptional drams from a beautiful distillery.
Brilliant. No, thank you for your time. I'd accidentally, instead of sending it into the chat, I'd sent it to Alistair privately by mistake. So now I've put it in the chat, and it's WS16DVT. So any issues, just drop an email to the email you got the link from. Julieann, thank you so much for your, and Luke, but particularly you, Julieann. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant, and it's great to have you on for a second time, and I hope you maybe come on again. Someone had mentioned in those comments that they've enjoyed the last two, and they'd even be up for another Deanston tasting in the next 6 months. So I'm not sure we'll do that, but we'll see. There'll definitely be, I know myself and Luke have been in conversations about some other brands from the portfolio. Before we actually finish, there was a question earlier on, which I think you would actually answer at the start, Luke. Someone had mentioned whether Heineken would disrupt your production, but as you said at the start, the Distell distilleries, the Deanston, Bunnahabhain, Tubmorey, were not included in that sale. So it's for long story short, pretty much business as usual. Luke, just to confirm that.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, it was just Luke had mentioned at the start.
You summed it up there correctly there, Luke. It's business as usual. It's just a name change for us. For those of you who didn't know, Distell International, which was our previous name, used to be owned by Distell in South Africa. And Distell in South Africa, they produce things like Amarula and lots of wine, and they do Savannah cider and things like that. And Heineken have bought that business in South Africa. Heineken, thank God, don't want anything to do with spirits. So we've been sectioned off, and we're effectively now more independent than we've ever been before. And we have the same owners and investors than we did as we were as Distell International. So hopefully it's given us a bit more freedom to go and do what Julieann needs us to do in terms of spirits and casks and things we need to do at distilleries. So watch this space. There's some really exciting things going to come out of CVH spirits over the next few years. So yeah, I hope that's a little bit of relief from everyone, that we're more independent than we ever were before.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. And it's been a while since I've been in the Deanston Cafe, so I might go there on the weekend when I've walked the dog down by Doon. So brilliant. Thank you both for your time. And yeah, we'd love to do it again shortly. And thanks everyone for joining in. If you're a regular on here and you've enjoyed, or for your first time you've enjoyed it, this one sold out very fast. So it's a weird one to say it on, but do tell anyone about Digital Drams. Make sure that you're spreading the word, because if demand increases and a few more of them sell out like this Deanston has, we will try and increase the volume. So if you've pals who you think would be into whiskey and you enjoy these, then do share them out there. Don't keep it your little secret, because we want to keep doing these going forward. So brilliant. Thank you again, both of you, for your time. And we'll talk again soon. And for the one last time, that discount code is WS16DVT. Thank you, Julieann, and thank you, Luke, and we'll talk to you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks
very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.